The winds of change howled through Sweetwater Creek, Colorado in the spring of 1875, but none blew fiercer than the whispers that followed Amelia Nichols as she walked down the town's main street, her 3-month-old son Henry bundled against her chest, her chin held high despite the weight of 1,000 judgmental stares. Amelia had once been the schoolteacher, beloved by the children and respected by their parents. That was before her belly swelled with child and no husband appeared to claim responsibility. Now, at 23, she lived in a small cabin at the edge of town, supporting herself and little Henry by taking in mending work and selling preserves. "Morning, Mrs. Peterson," Amelia called politely to the general store owner's wife, who merely pursed her lips and turned away. "Shameful, Mrs. Peterson muttered just loud enough for Amelia to hear. Walking around town like she has nothing to be ashamed of. Amelia clutched Henry closer, whispering into his downy hair, "Don't you mind them, my sweet boy. You're the best thing that ever happened to me." The little bell above the mercantile door jingled as Amelia entered. Mr. Thompson, the proprietor, was helping a tall stranger, a man whose broad shoulders were draped in a worn leather duster, his dark hair falling just past his collar. His boots were caked with the red dust of the trail, and the spurs clinked softly as he shifted his weight. "I'll need supplies for 2 weeks," the stranger was saying, his voice deep and resonant. "Heading north to start work at the Triple R. You'll be working for Mr. Richardson then, Mr. Thompson asked, gathering the requested items. "Vaughn O'Malley, was it?" "That's right." Amelia tried to make herself inconspicuous as she approached the counter with her short list of necessities: flour, coffee, sugar, and a small piece of hard candy she allowed herself once a month. Henry chose that moment to fuss, his small whimpers quickly escalating to cries that echoed in the quiet store. Amelia bounced him gently. "Hush now, little one," she soothed, but Henry was not to be consoled. Mr. Thompson's face hardened. "Miss Nichols, perhaps you'd better come back later when the baby is settled." The stranger Vaughn turned then, his eyes a startling blue against his sun-bronzed skin. He looked first at Henry, then at Amelia's flushed face. "I don't mind a baby's crying," he said simply. "Sounds of life, Mr. Thompson snorted. "Well, some kinds of life are more welcome than others, if you take my meaning." Amelia's cheeks burned with humiliation. She knew she should leave, but stubborn pride rooted her to the spot. "I don't take your meaning," Vaughn replied, his tone cooling considerably. "A baby's a baby, and this one looks healthy and well cared for." He smiled at Henry, who had quieted somewhat at the sound of the new voice. The baby stared back with wide, curious eyes. "He's a fine-looking boy," Vaughn said to Amelia directly. "How old?" 3 months, she answered, surprised by his friendliness. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat. "Miss Nichols was our schoolteacher until her condition became apparent. Had to let her go, of course. Can't have someone of her character teaching impressionable children." Vaughn's eyebrows rose. "Seems to me a woman raising a child on her own shows plenty of character." He paid for his supplies and gathered them into his saddlebags. As he turned to leave, he tipped his hat to Amelia. "Madam," he said respectfully, then walked out into the bright Colorado sunshine. Amelia watched him go, something warm and unexpected flickering in her chest for the first time in many months. The next week passed uneventfully. Amelia focused on her work, grateful for the steady flow of mending that kept food on her table. Mrs. Richardson from the Triple R Ranch had been one of the few women in town who still employed her services, though she always sent a ranch hand to collect and deliver the clothing rather than coming herself. On Thursday, Amelia sat on her small porch, needle flashing in the afternoon light as she mended a pair of work trousers. Henry slept in a basket beside her, his little face peaceful in slumber. The sound of hoofbeats made her look up, shading her eyes against the sun. It was the stranger from the mercantile, Vaughn O'Malley, riding a tall chestnut gelding. He dismounted with fluid grace and approached her porch. "Miss Nichols," he said, removing his hat. "Mrs. Richardson sent me to fetch the mending." "Oh," Amelia said, setting aside her work. "I wasn't expecting anyone until tomorrow. I haven't quite finished." "No rush," he replied easily. "I can come back." She studied him curiously. Most of the ranch hands who came for the mending were boys barely out of their teens, not seasoned cowboys like this one. Mrs. Richardson must think highly of you to trust you with such an errand so soon after hiring you, she observed. A smile played at the corners of his mouth. I believe she wanted to see if I'd balk at the assignment. And why would you? Amelia asked, though she knew the answer well enough. Some men in town seem to think you've got some kind of disease that might be catching, he said bluntly. Foolishness, if you ask me. Henry stirred in his basket, blinking awake. His face scrunched, preparing to cry, but Amelia lifted him before the wail could start, settling him against her shoulder. The disease of motherhood, she asked, a rare bitterness coloring her tone. The disease of loving someone who didn't deserve you, I'd wager, Vaughn replied quietly. Amelia's eyes widened. No one in Sweetwater had ever suggested she might have been wronged rather than being the wrongdoer. You don't know anything about me, she said. I know enough. I know you're raising that boy alone in a town that's turned its back on you. I know you work hard, those hands of yours tell that story, and I know that baby's well fed and clean and looks at you like you hung the moon. Amelia felt tears threaten and turned away. The mending will be ready tomorrow, Mr. O'Malley. Please tell Mrs. Richardson. He settled his hat back on his head. I'll come by myself if that's all right with you. She nodded without looking at him, afraid of what her face might reveal. After he left, Amelia found herself thinking about Vaughn O'Malley far more than was sensible. His kindness was disarming after months of scorn and judgment, but kindness could be deceptive, she reminded herself. She'd learned that lesson all too well. The following day, Vaughn returned as promised. This time, he brought a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. Mrs. Richardson sent these, he said, handing her the package along with payment for the mending. Said there's some baby things her youngest has outgrown. Amelia unwrapped the parcel to find several tiny shirts and a soft knitted blanket. This is very kind, she said, genuinely touched. Please thank her for me. You could thank her yourself on Sunday, Vaughn suggested. The Richardsons are having a picnic for the ranch hands after church. Mrs. Richardson specifically said you and the little one should come. Amelia stared at him in disbelief. I don't attend church anymore, Mr. O'Malley. Not invited or don't want to go. Both, she admitted. The Reverend made it quite clear that unwed mothers are not welcome in his congregation. Anger flashed across Vaughn's features. That's not very Christian of him. Perhaps not, but it's very human, Amelia sighed. And as for the picnic, I appreciate the invitation, but I don't think it would be comfortable for anyone. Vaughn studied her for a long moment. You know, where I come from, folks believe every child is a blessing, no matter the circumstances. And where is that, Mr. O'Malley? This mythical place where women like me aren't ruined, Montana Territory, he answered. My mother raised 5 of us after my father died in a mining accident. Nobody called her ruined. They called her strong. The comparison made Amelia uncomfortable. That's different. Your mother was a widow, not a what? He challenged gently. She couldn't bring herself to say the words others had used against her. Your boy's a gift, Miss Nichols. And from what I can see, so are you. The folks who can't see that are the ones with the problem, not you. He tipped his hat and departed, leaving Amelia speechless on her porch, holding baby clothes and dangerous hope in equal measure. Despite her reservations, Amelia found herself preparing for the Richardson picnic that Sunday. She washed her best dress, a simple blue cotton that had grown loose since Henry's birth, and polished her worn boots. Henry, she dressed in his finest gown, the one she'd lovingly embroidered during the long nights of her pregnancy. We probably shouldn't go, she told him as she brushed her long auburn hair. But Mr. O'Malley was so insistent, and Mrs. Richardson did send those lovely things for you. Henry cooed in response, batting at the air with his tiny fists. Yes, I know you like him, Amelia smiled. But we barely know him, sweetheart, and handsome cowboys with kind words don't always have kind intentions. She thought of Thomas, Henry's father, who had promised her the world and left her with nothing but a swelling belly and a broken heart. The young bank clerk had been so charming, so seemingly sincere in his affections. When she told him about the baby, he'd vanished overnight, reportedly taking a position at a bank in Denver. His parting note had been cruelly brief. I'm not ready for a family, don't follow me. The Triple R Ranch lay 3 miles outside of town. Amelia had walked the distance before, but never with Henry in her arms. She set out early, packing a small bag with necessities for the baby and the jar of peach preserves she'd made as a thank-you gift for Mrs. Richardson. The day was mild for early summer, with gentle breezes carrying the scent of wildflowers. Amelia had walked perhaps half the distance when she heard the now familiar sound of hoofbeats behind her. "Miss Nichols," Vaughn called, drawing his horse alongside her. "I was hoping to catch you. Didn't think you should have to walk all that way." He dismounted and offered his hand. "May I help you up?" Amelia hesitated. "I've never ridden with a baby before." "I'll lead the horse," he assured her. "Nice and slow, you just hold on to Henry and the saddle horn." After a moment's consideration, Amelia nodded. Vaughn lifted her effortlessly onto the saddle, then carefully handed Henry up to her. The baby gurgled happily, fascinated by the horse. "He's going to be a natural horseman," Vaughn observed, taking the reins and beginning to lead them down the road. "Got that look of curiosity about him." "His father was afraid of horses," Amelia said without thinking, then bit her lip, wishing she hadn't mentioned Thomas. Vaughn simply nodded. "Not everyone takes to them. I was practically born in the saddle myself. My mother used to say I could ride before I could walk." "How long have you been a cowboy?" Amelia asked, grateful for the change of subject. "Since I was 16, he replied. "Started out as a wrangler on a ranch near Helena, worked my way up to trail boss by 22. Drove cattle from Texas to Montana 3 times. That sounds like a hard life." "It has its moments," he admitted, "but there's freedom in it, and I've seen country most folks only dream about." "What brought you to Colorado?" she asked. Vaughn was quiet for a moment. "Time for a change, I suppose. Wanted to put down some roots." They arrived at the Triple R to find the picnic already underway. Several ranch hands and their families were scattered across the grassy yard, enjoying Mrs. Richardson's famous fried chicken and lemonade. A fiddle player provided cheerful background music. Mrs. Richardson herself, a plump, pleasant woman in her 40s, hurried over to greet them. "Amelia, I'm so glad you came," she said warmly. "And this must be little Henry. May I hold him?" Surprised by the enthusiastic welcome, Amelia carefully transferred Henry to Mrs. Richardson's capable arms. "He's beautiful," Mrs. Richardson declared, smiling down at the baby. "Those eyes, just like sapphires." "Thank you for the baby clothes," Amelia said. "It was very kind of you." "Nonsense," Mrs. Richardson waved away the thanks. "They were just gathering dust. Now come and eat. You're much too thin, my dear." Throughout the afternoon, Amelia found herself included in conversations and activities in a way she hadn't experienced since before Henry's birth. The ranch hands were respectful, the women friendly if a bit curious. No one openly questioned her presence or treated her like she carried a contagion. When Henry began to fuss, Mrs. Richardson pointed out a quiet spot under a cottonwood tree where Amelia could nurse him in privacy. As she settled against the trunk, adjusting her shawl for modesty, she saw Vaughn watching her from across the yard. He quickly looked away when their eyes met, but not before she caught the expression on his face, not judgment or leering, but something like admiration. Later, as the sun began its descent, Vaughn approached her. "May I walk you home?" he asked. "I can bring the horse for when the little one gets tired." "Thank you," Amelia accepted. "That's very thoughtful." They set off down the road, Vaughn leading his horse with one hand and carrying Amelia's bag with the other. The late afternoon light painted the landscape in gold, and a comfortable silence settled between them. "Thank you for convincing me to come today," Amelia said eventually. "It was nice to feel normal again." "You are normal," Vaughn replied. "It's the rest of that town that's all twisted up. They believe they're upholding morality. They're upholding hypocrisy," he countered. "Half those men who turn their noses up at you have probably done worse than whatever your baby's father did. They just didn't get caught." Amelia adjusted Henry in her arms. "It doesn't matter anymore. What's done is done. I just want Henry to have a good life." "And what about you?" Vaughn asked softly. "Don't you deserve a good life too?" She didn't answer. The question felt too raw, too close to wishes she'd long since buried. When they reached the halfway point, Henry began to grow restless. Vaughn helped Amelia onto the horse, but this time, instead of leading them, he swung up behind her, one arm securely around her waist, the other holding the reins. "This all right?" he asked, his breath warm against her ear. Amelia nodded, acutely aware of his solid presence at her back, the strength in the arm that held her. It had been so long since she'd been touched with any kind of tenderness that even this practical embrace made her heart race. At her cabin, Vaughn helped her down and waited while she settled Henry, who had fallen asleep during the ride. "Would you like to come in for coffee?" Amelia offered impulsively. Vaughn smiled. "I'd like that very much." Inside the small cabin, Amelia busied herself with the coffee pot while Vaughn looked around with interest. The space was modest but meticulously clean, with cheerful curtains at the windows and a small vase of wildflowers on the table. In one corner stood a cradle that showed signs of recent repairs and a fresh coat of paint. "Did you make that?" Vaughn asked, nodding toward the cradle. "No, I bought it secondhand," Amelia replied, setting 2 cups on the table, "but I fixed it up as best I could." "You've made a real home here," he observed, taking the seat she offered. "We manage," she said, pouring the coffee. "It's not much, but it's ours." "That counts for a lot," Vaughn said. "Some folks spend their whole lives in grand houses that never feel like home." As they sipped their coffee, Vaughn told her stories of his travels, cattle drives through Indian Territory, wild storms on the plains, the beauty of Montana's mountain valleys. Amelia found herself laughing more than she had in months, drawn in by his easy manner and expressive storytelling. "What about you?" he asked eventually. "Have you always lived in Sweetwater?" "No," Amelia replied. "I grew up in Pennsylvania. My father was a professor at a small college there. When he died, there was little money left. I had teaching credentials, and there was an advertisement for a schoolteacher here. It seemed like an adventure." "And was it? Before?" He gestured vaguely. "It was," she admitted. "I loved teaching. The children here are bright and eager. And the country is so beautiful, different from the green hills I grew up with, but magnificent in its own way." "Do you miss teaching?" Amelia nodded, a familiar sadness washing over her. "Every day, but that part of my life is over now." "It doesn't have to be," Vaughn said. "There are other towns, places where people might be more understanding." "Perhaps," she conceded, though the idea of starting over somewhere new with a baby seemed overwhelming. "But Sweetwater is our home now, for better or worse." When Vaughn finally took his leave, the sun had set and stars were beginning to appear in the indigo sky. At the door, he turned to her. "Miss Nichols, Amelia, would it be all right if I called on you again?" The question hung between them, weighted with possibilities that both thrilled and terrified her. "I'm not sure that would be wise, Mr. O'Malley," she answered carefully. "Vaughn," he corrected. "And why not?" "You know why," she said, gesturing to the sleeping baby. "I come with complications. And this town already has opinions about me. They'd think the same of you if you were seen keeping company with me." "I've never much cared what people think," Vaughn said. "And as for complications, life is complicated, doesn't mean it can't also be good." Before she could respond, he leaned forward and placed a gentle kiss on her cheek. "Good night, Amelia," he said, then mounted his horse and rode away into the gathering darkness. Amelia touched her cheek where his lips had been, a flutter of something like hope rising in her chest despite her best efforts to suppress it. Over the next few weeks, Vaughn became a regular visitor to Amelia's cabin. Sometimes he brought small gifts, a ribbon for her hair, a wooden toy for Henry, fresh berries he'd picked along the trail. Other times, he simply offered his company and his help with chores that required strength she didn't possess, like chopping wood or fixing her leaky roof. The townsfolk noticed, of course. New whispers followed Amelia when she ventured into town speculation about her relationship with the handsome cowboy, predictions that he would soon tire of her, cruel suggestions about his motives. "They're saying awful things about you," Amelia told Vaughn one evening as they sat on her porch watching the sunset. Henry lay on a blanket between them, practicing his newfound ability to roll over. "Let them talk," Vaughn shrugged. "Words can't hurt me." "But they could hurt your reputation, your position at the R. Mrs. Richardson thinks you walk on water," Vaughn assured her, "and Mr. Richardson only cares that I do my job, which I do well." "Still," Amelia persisted, "I wouldn't want to be the cause of any trouble for you." Vaughn reached over and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm against her skin. Amelia, the only trouble in my life would be not seeing you and this little fellow. He tickled Henry's belly, eliciting a delighted gurgle from the baby. Besides, things are changing, Mrs. Peterson actually nodded to you in town yesterday. I saw it with my own eyes. It was true. Some of the more charitable women in town had begun to thaw toward Amelia, influenced perhaps by Mrs. Richardson's open friendship or simply by the passage of time. The Reverend and his wife remained coldly disapproving, as did several of the town's most prominent citizens, but the absolute isolation Amelia had experienced in the early months of Henry's life was gradually easing. "I still don't understand why you bother with us," Amelia said softly. Vaughn turned to face her fully. "Don't you? I thought I'd been pretty clear about my feelings." "You've been kind," she acknowledged. "More than kind, but you're waiting for me to leave," he finished for her. "Like he did." Amelia lowered her eyes. "It would be the sensible thing for you to do. A man like you could have his pick of respectable women without my history, my burdens." "I don't want respectable women," Vaughn said, then laughed at how that sounded. "I mean, I don't want someone else. I want you, Amelia, you and Henry both." He moved closer, lifting her chin with his finger until she met his gaze. "I've known since that first day in the Mercantile, when you stood there with your head high despite Thompson's rudeness. You've got more courage and dignity than anyone I've ever met." "That's not true," Amelia protested weakly. "It is," Vaughn insisted. "You know what I saw that day? I saw gold, pure gold, standing there in a dusty store with a baby on her hip. And that boy of yours, he's gold too. Both of you, precious beyond counting." Tears welled in Amelia's eyes. "You can't mean that." "I've never meant anything more," Vaughn said, and then he was kissing her, his lips tender against hers, his hand cradling her face as if she were indeed made of something precious. When they parted, Amelia's heart was racing. "Vaughn, you don't have to say anything," he assured her. "I know you need time, I know trusting doesn't come easy after what happened, but I'm not going anywhere, Amelia, not unless you send me away." As summer turned to fall, Amelia's relationship with Vaughn deepened. He spent most evenings at her cabin, often staying to help put Henry to bed before reluctantly departing for the bunkhouse at the R. On Sundays, they attended the services at the Richardsons' home, where several families who had become uncomfortable with the Reverend's rigid stance had begun to gather. Henry thrived under the attention of his mother and her suitor. At 6 months, he was sitting up, reaching for objects with determined little hands, and laughing a sound that never failed to make Vaughn's face light up with joy. "He's got a strong grip," Vaughn observed one October afternoon as Henry clutched his finger. "Going to be good with a rope someday." "Oh, is that what you see for him?" Amelia asked, curious. She'd been careful not to press Vaughn about his intentions, still half afraid to believe that his affection for her and Henry would last. "I see all kinds of possibilities for him," Vaughn replied. "Whatever he wants to be. But yes, I'd teach him to ride and rope if that's what he'd like." The casual way he spoke of a future with them made Amelia's heart swell, yet doubts still lingered. Thomas had made promises too in the beginning. Late one night, after Vaughn had left and Henry was sleeping peacefully, a knock at the door startled Amelia. She approached cautiously, lamp in hand. "Who's there?" she called. "It's me," Vaughn's voice answered. "I'm sorry to disturb you so late, but I need to speak with you." Amelia opened the door to find him standing there, hat in hand, an uncharacteristically serious expression on his face. "What's wrong?" she asked, fear immediately gripping her. "Has something happened?" "Nothing's wrong," he assured her, stepping inside, "but something has happened. I've made a decision, and I couldn't wait until morning to tell you." Amelia set the lamp down, her hands suddenly trembling. "What decision?" Vaughn took a deep breath. "I've bought the old Mayer place, the small ranch about 5 miles north of here." "You've bought land?" Amelia repeated, surprised. 60 acres, he nodded. "Good pasture, decent water rights, and a house that needs some work but is solid at its core." He stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "Amelia, I want you and Henry to live there with me, as my family, as my wife and son." Amelia stared at him, speechless. "I know it's sudden," Vaughn continued nervously. And I know you might need time to think about it, but I love you, Amelia. I love Henry like he was my own blood. I want to give you both a home where you never have to feel judged or unwelcome again." "Vaughn," Amelia finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are you certain? Marriage is its forever, and Henry will be my son in every way that matters," Vaughn said firmly. "I'll give him my name, teach him everything I know, love him with all my heart. I already do." Tears spilled down Amelia's cheeks. "People will talk. They'll say you only married me because— Let them talk," Vaughn interrupted, cupping her face in his hands. "The only people whose opinions matter to me are right here in this room. Well, one's asleep in the cradle over there, but you know what I mean." A laugh bubbled through Amelia's tears. "I do love you," she admitted, the words feeling both terrifying and liberating. "So much, but I'm afraid." "Of what?" he asked gently. "Of believing in this," she confessed. "Of letting myself hope only to have it all taken away again." Vaughn pulled her close, his strong arms encircling her. "I can't promise that life won't bring hardships, Amelia. But I can promise that whatever comes, we'll face it together. I won't leave you. Not ever." In the quiet of the cabin, with Henry's soft breathing the only sound, Amelia made her choice. She reached up and kissed Vaughn, pouring all her hope and fear and love into the gesture. "Yes," she whispered against his lips. "Yes, I'll marry you." Their wedding took place on a crisp November day at the Triple R Ranch. Mrs. Richardson had insisted on hosting, transforming the barn into a space of rustic elegance with lanterns and autumn flowers. Most of the ranch hands attended, along with a surprising number of townsfolk, those who had come to know Vaughn or who had gradually softened toward Amelia. Amelia wore a new dress of deep blue, with Henry, now 7 months old, balanced on her hip in a little suit that matched Vaughn's. Mr. Richardson, who had been authorized by the territorial government to perform marriages, officiated with jovial dignity. "Do you, Vaughn O'Malley, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" he asked. "I do," Vaughn answered, his eyes never leaving Amelia's face. "And do you, Amelia Nichols, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do," she replied, her voice clear and certain. "Then by the authority vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife," Mr. Richardson declared. "Vaughn, you may kiss your bride, though mind the baby." Laughter rippled through the gathering as Vaughn carefully leaned around Henry to place a tender kiss on Amelia's lips. Henry patted both their faces, drawing more chuckles from the guests. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mr. Richardson announced, "I present to you Mr. and Mrs. O'Malley and young Master Henry O'Malley." The celebration that followed was warm and joyful. Mrs. Richardson had prepared a feast, and the ranch's cook had baked a 3-tier cake adorned with fresh berries. The fiddle player from the summer picnic provided music for dancing, and Vaughn surprised everyone with his graceful movements as he waltzed with Amelia, Henry now being passed among admiring guests. As the evening drew to a close, Vaughn and Amelia prepared to depart for their new home. They had spent the past month renovating the house, making it ready for their family. "Are you happy?" Vaughn asked as he helped her into the wagon, Henry already asleep in her arms. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Amelia answered truthfully. As they drove away amid cheers and well wishes, Amelia looked back at the people gathered in the lantern light. Once she had felt like an outcast, a woman ruined beyond redemption. Now she was a wife, still a mother, and soon to be a rancher's partner in building a new life. "Look," Vaughn said, pointing upward as they traveled the moonlit road to their home. A shooting star blazed across the night sky, brilliant and fleeting. "Make a wish," he suggested. Amelia smiled, nestling against his shoulder with Henry secure between them. "I don't need to," she said. "I already have everything I could wish for." 5 years later, the O'Malley Ranch was thriving. What had begun as 60 acres had expanded to nearly 200, with a small but growing herd of cattle and several fine horses. The house had been enlarged to accommodate their growing family. Henry, now 5, had been joined by 3-year-old twins, Sarah and Samuel. On a warm summer evening, Amelia stood on the porch, watching as Vaughn taught Henry to throw a lasso. The boy's face was a study in concentration, his tongue caught between his teeth as he tried to mimic his father's movements. When the small rope finally settled around the post Vaughn had set up as a target, Henry's whoop of triumph echoed across the yard. "Mama, did you see?" Henry called, turning to her with shining eyes. "I did it just like Pa showed me." "I saw," Amelia called back, her heart full. "Well done, sweetheart," Vaughn ruffled the boy's dark hair proudly. "You're a natural, son. Keep practicing and you'll be out-ropping me by next summer." Inside the house, one of the twins began to cry. "That's Samuel," Amelia sighed. "Sounds like he's awake from his nap." "I'll get him," Vaughn offered, jogging up to the porch. "You stay and watch the champion roper at work." As he passed her, he stole a quick kiss. 5 years of marriage had done nothing to diminish the spark between them. If anything, their love had deepened with each challenge overcome, each joy shared. Later that night, with all three children finally asleep, Amelia and Vaughn sat on their porch swing, his arm around her shoulders as they gazed at the star-filled sky. "I saw Mrs. Peterson in town today," Amelia mentioned. She asked if Henry might be interested in joining the school's baseball team when he starts in the fall. Vaughn chuckled. "The same Mrs. Peterson who used to cross the street to avoid you. My, how times change." "It's not just time," Amelia said, leaning into his embrace. "It's you. You showed me that the past doesn't define us, that we get to write our own stories." "You did that yourself," Vaughn corrected gently. "You were already writing your story with Henry long before I came along. I just got lucky enough to be included in the chapters that followed." Amelia turned to look at him, this man who had seen gold where others had seen only shame. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Taking on another man's child, facing the gossip, building all of this from nothing?" Vaughn's answer was a kiss that still made her heart race after all these years. "Never," he whispered against her lips. "Not for a single moment." And as the night deepened around their home, their sanctuary built on love and second chances, Amelia knew with absolute certainty that what had once seemed like her greatest shame had led her to her greatest blessing. In this man's eyes, in the family they had created together, she had found her true worth. Not ruined, but golden, precious beyond measure, loved.